Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where it's all about how you can turn your creative passion into a profession. My name is Eva, and my guest today is an amazing concept artist and illustrator based in Adelaide, South Australia. He has been growing and running his company over the last 5 years. The studio creates concept art and illustration for just about any project in the film, video game, and comic book industry. He is also known for his work on the video game Path of Exile, the independent comic The Adventures of Lightning Rod, and his work on the Disney World for Nintendo DS. He has worked for a variety of clients, both nationally and internationally, among many others Disney, ConceptArt.org, CG Hub, Grinding Gear Games, and ImagineFX. He is also the illustrator and writer for a comic Luminous Ages, which is an ongoing production funded through Patreon, and he is currently running a Kickstarter campaign for the issue 3 of his Luminous Ages comic, so go check it out. And please welcome Anthony Christou, and let's get to the interview. Okay, so welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Anthony here. Hi!
Hi, how are you today?
Good, and I hope you're also great. And let's just start right away with your background, and maybe you can share some of your stories, how you got to art, or which were like first creative outlets you had as a child.
Well, as a child, I had some interesting outlets. I actually did a lot of dancing, acting, and singing. I was always doing art, like in my spare time, but had a natural gift for dancing, believe it or not, all styles of dancing, from R&B, hip-hop, to jazz, ballet, tap dancing, the whole lot.
Cool.
And so I was always creative as a child. I was always doing acting, and we did a lot of acting and plays in the backyard, and that kind of inspired my creative outlet. I'd always draw productions like I was actually making movies. It was really funny, and we do these shows for our family, and they just laugh because they think, "Oh, you crazy kids," But they loved it, and that's kind of where it all started. Dancing, singing, acting, and I was always sketching from a young age. My grandmother was she's not a fashion designer, but she was a dressmaker, and she worked with many fashion designers. So I'd sit in my grandma's house, and I'd be drawing while she was making dresses. So I'd be drawing cars and monsters, and she'd be making these pretty dresses. So maybe that inspired me. So yeah.
Did you also play board games when you were a child? Because now you like them as well, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, as a child, I was into games like Hero Quest. I played a bit of Magic cards, but from a younger age, it was more Hero Quest and Lego as well. Believe it or not, I used to play with Lego. You were telling me about your history with Lego, but I was brought up with that. My dad would sit down at night with me, and I think we made a pirate ship. We made the pirate cave. And then I had everything. I was really lucky, and I think that kind of having parents that kind of allowed that creativity and that imagination to grow was great. And I actually made up my own kind of tabletop game. What's a tabletop? Because it was all on the ground, and it was with Lego.
Oh, really?
So what we had pirate ships, and we had caves and castles and all that sort of stuff. And so whenever I had friends over, we built these big epic fortresses and pirate ships and all that sort of stuff. And we'd have the cannons. So everyone had 3 cannons, and you could have 3 shots. And you'd fire the cannons at each other, and every time you hit something, you had a radius of what you'd have to take away from your castle. So it was kind of I was designing crazy stuff like that from a little kid, and board games, and and writing my own comics and creating comics in high school as well. So I missed doing dancing, but for me, dancing it wasn't that it wasn't a career path for me, but I had some health issues with my knee and my back. So I was I need to get away from this and find another creative outlet. And luckily art was always there, and that kind of took over my life, which is in a good way. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, because also to have other creative outlets are also a good thing to balance it, so you don't have to do it professionally, but just to dance from time to time. It's a good way to do some sport or movement when you are sitting all day, right?
Yeah. Of course. So now I'd like to get back into some dancing, maybe some Latin dancing or whatever, and just part time. And I think when I was doing it, I was very serious when I was doing it young. I was doing competitions. We won. I think we got third in Asia Pacific Championships when we were 10 years old, me and my sister. And so like that kind of competitiveness in dancing ruined the passion for me. I think that because you're kind of always worried about, I've got to make sure this dance move is perfect and all that. And I kind of, I do miss dancing, but I know that if I ever went back to it, it would just be for fun and to get away, get up and move, because I'm sitting down and painting all day or drawing or writing, which I love. It's good as a creative outlet, or just, you know, for movement, or like a sport. It's a sport, of course, you know, so.
Yeah, because
you know.
a lot of people also are like, when they are starting out, they are worried that if they start drawing professionally, that they will also take it as a chore, you know, that is too much, or,
Yeah.
you know. So how did you like went around that part, or you never worried about this?
More with in terms of the art, like worrying,
Yeah,
worrying
like
if
doing
it's a
too much
chore,
art, then it's like, oh yeah, I have to do it, so you kind of lose creativity, or it wasn't the case.
yeah. I've like I haven't really experienced it. I think I do experience burnout. Like if I'm working like 3 weeks straight and I haven't had a day off, I do get kind of tired. I do love it still, but I get tired, and you wear yourself out. So you have to take breaks. You know, you take a day off, or you have the weekend off, and you know, we are all human. You know, at the end of the day, we can't be working like machines nonstop. So, but I'm kind of lucky that I do love what I do. I really do love creating art in my worlds. I think I've been lucky. I've kind of transitioned from client work to creating my comic book series, Luminous Ages, and the card game, and that's kind of been an income for me now. And I'm doing what I'm getting up and I get to create my own characters. Like I'm my own boss. You know, I don't have anyone kind of saying, you know, don't do this, or you have to draw, I don't know, robots nonstop. You know, I do love drawing robots, but doing that nonstop would be boring. So I think mixing it up, you know, changing like, I go from writing the comic to creating concept art to doing, you know, sequential art, or breaking up your day. It doesn't feel, it kind of feels like a dream for me, you know, and I'm pretty lucky. And I mean, it's been 7 years doing this, like doing art, and, you know, apart from burning out from working, you know, day after day for say a month straight or 2 months straight, where you can get like that when you're working with big clients and big studios. You know, that's just normal to any job you do, anything you love, you kind of have to take a day off every so often, or take time out for yourself to go for a run, go to the beach and come back to it, you know. So, but that's about it, I think. So, yeah.
And maybe before we go to your projects or current things happening now, maybe you can share how did you first got to like first paid projects or freelance work, you know, like when you're transitioning from, you know, just studying the art and then like being a professional. How was the transition?
Yeah, my career is really, really interesting because, and I'm not saying because it's me, but I kind of didn't expect to get into this. I started off as a graphic designer. So I was a graphic designer for about 8 years. But when I went through art school, I actually went to uni with a guy called Simon Scales, who's pretty famous in Australia. He's created a whole concept art school, which has actually won awards. It's one of Australia's best schools right now. And what happened was we went to uni together, and I went into the field of graphic design. He went to illustration, and then I went on my own journey. And I was doing graphic design, got sick of graphic design because I kind of got a lot of corporate jobs in Australia. There was only like designing logos for government or banks, and I never got anything really creative. Like I think the most creative job I had was, the first job I had was a multimedia company doing animation, and that was fun, you know, designing interactive CDs with flash animation, and that was my entry-level job straight out of uni, and that was very lucky. But I think that was in the year 2000, and that's when there was the dot-com crash. I don't know what age, if you were around at that time, but the dot-com crash was really bad for websites and that. And so for a media and web design company that needed like a graphic designer, an illustrator, or an animator, I was the first guy to kind of go. They had their programmer there. They had me as the animator. And so obviously after 6 months, they kind of said, look, we can't keep you on because we're having to cut back to just making websites, no animation. So that was a bit disappointing. And then it got worse and worse. The graphic design jobs got more and more corporate and boring. And after about 8 years, a friend of mine who I went to, another friend of mine called Daryl, he was a lecturer at the university. He was teaching graphic design and animation, 2D animation like multimedia, using like Flash and all that sort of stuff, teaching students how to do really cool portfolio presentations. And he goes, look, you know, I know you're not happy in your design job. Do you want to take my position? He was getting married in Japan, and he met his partner in Japan. And he goes, look, do you want my job? And I was like, yeah, let's give it a crack. And so going to the university, I got the job. I was there for about 5 years. Luckily, I had a degree behind me in visual arts. I have a Bachelor of Visual Communication, Bachelor of Visual Arts. And then that all got, while I was at the uni and I was teaching, I was studying as well to have a master's. So I've got a master's in design and art. And I think what actually happened there was I kind of transitioned. I met Simon again, who was doing illustration in 2008. Mm-hmm. He was teaching illustration. I was teaching animation and graphic design. And he's like, have you heard of this thing called concept art? And this is in 2008, because Australia is really far back. You've got to understand, like, we don't get things quickly because we live in the land of kangaroos and that. So exactly, we're so separate. And it really is like that. I mean, in 2000, my lecturer, who was very old and he was doing his PhD, he did not know about concept art in 2000. He knew about 3D animation and 3D modeling. And for me, he was trying to push me down that. And I did a few electives in 3D animation and modeling, but I just was not, my heart wasn't in it. I just felt like I was a cog in the machine as a modeler or something. I felt like me as an artist, I wanted to be this, concept artist or an art director or, creating my own projects. I didn't want to be just a little cog in a machine. And I think, that's just how Australia was at the time. And I think the great thing about doing graphic design, though, is it's helped me now doing all the things that I've done. I kind of say I regret it. I wish I went into art sooner, or I wish I found about illustration sooner. But the big thing is I had so much experience. I learned how to teach. I'd learned graphic design, which is all really necessary in this field. Obviously, teaching, you learn how to communicate with people, obviously I knew how to do that, but you learn how to do it better and how to help
articulate
other people.
And just express. Yeah.
Exactly. So you learn, I suppose, teaching skills and that sort of stuff. And so for me, I realized I did love teaching. I love the university, but then they were kind of putting pressure on for me to become an academic and get a PhD. And I was doing a PhD in philosophy, and I was studying the uncanny valley, which is why things look odd with human faces in animation and CGI, like with, I think, Star Wars. What was the last one? The one where they had the CGI Princess Leia?
Yeah, but I don't know the name. It's like everyone will hate me,
No, I think it was Rogue One. I think Rogue One, when they had Princess Leia at the end. I think, is it at the end or is it Force Awakens? Anyway, that was all done with 3D, and that feeling of that uneasiness is called the uncanny valley. Mm-hmm. And I was doing a PhD on that, and I soon realized that that's not what I wanted to do, because it was all about writing, academic writing, researching, understanding psychology and philosophy. Yeah. I was getting away from actually being an artist or creating things. So I started getting some freelance work in about 2010.
And that was from social media or through your friends, or how did you get to that?
Well, social media wasn't big back then. I think Facebook only came about in 2008, and it was actually just through networking. I had a web presence, I had a website, and a multimedia company contacted me from America doing apps, games. I think I was really active on Concept Art.org, those communities. They have postings for jobs. So I was applying for jobs there while I was at I was still lecturing at the university, and I was still writing my PhD, but I started to get a lot of freelance work, and I got jobs in mobile games and all that sort of stuff. And I also was doing Gnomon Workshop. I was doing competitions, trying to enter my concept art into there. And after about a year of struggle, I started winning awards. So I got first got fourth place, then I got third, then I got second, then I finally got first place. Cool. So, which was really good achievements for me, because it kind of helped me transition to freelance work. And I kind of had enough studio work or client work in 2012. And it was kind of like an ultimatum where the university was saying, look, you can stay with us, but we're only going to give you lecturing position, and you have to get a PhD. And they weren't cutting my job, but they were just cutting all their funding to academic support. So I couldn't get any other income. And I had this freelance work on the other side, and I'm thinking to myself, I think I'm just going to jump into freelance in 2012. And it was really scary because I had just a basic income, and I was relying on freelance for about a year or two. And it was kind of, I wouldn't say dark time, but it was hard times, because that's all I had. I kind of made the jump from a very cushy academic job where you have your superannuation, you have your benefits, you have, all the kind of perks of being a lecturer, going back to being on your own and being thrown in the deep end. And I knew a lot about business because my father had businesses. He was a plumber. He's owned cafes. And I knew a lot about accounting and business, so that wasn't the scary part. But what the scary part was where do I get work from? Yeah. And, but luckily I actually was a member of a group called the Adelaide Illustrators because I'm from Adelaide in South Australia. And they were like an agency, and they were doing really well. And it was actually the person that was running it was a guy called Murray Van who's worked on a lot of animations, 2D animations, and he did this TV show for kids in Australia called Bananas in Pajamas. I don't know if you have that overseas. It's an Australian thing.
Maybe it is. So, I just haven't seen it.
Maybe, yeah. But he's done a lot of animation and sold a lot of stuff to actual European companies. And he had almost like an illustration agency that he set up. And I joined as a member. You paid like $200 a year to be a member. It wasn't much at the time. And I started getting work. I started getting work with advertising agencies, with doing storyboarding, doing concept art, a whole range of stuff. And that kept me going. And I was surviving. I was earning a basic income. But I think it wasn't the money. I was just happy that I was doing what I loved and I was surviving at the time, which was really good. So, but yeah, I kind of then, I did a course with Simon as well, Simon Scales. So with the concept design workshop, I upped my skills as well. And I met a lot of people in the industry, people at Weta. There's a studio in South Australia called Rising Sun Pictures. They do a lot of the effects for Game of Thrones, so I networked with those people, and also that helped me to push my skills, my concept art skills, to the next level, and that made my folio shine a little bit more. And I started getting, in 2013, I started getting some really good jobs with Disney. I got to work on with a game called Path of Exile with Grinding Gear Games. So we're doing like game assets for a whole year. I had a project where I was just doing game assets, concept art, and that was a really amazing project because it was very creative. And they actually were funded on Kickstarter. So their project was all Kickstarter, and so they had all these commissions, all these people that backed it. If they paid like $200, they got their own separate graphic. Mm-hmm. In the game, so whenever you were killed by this person, their graphic would pop up. so I was the person that was doing all those graphics for about a year and a half. So I mean, do you want me to keep on going on? Or?
No, but it's really cool to find out like how you can get like new jobs or how to do the connections. And so, for example, when you were part of this illustrator and artistic society, does that still work? Like if someone wants to do, what you do now, would you still recommend, like to join some of these societies, or what would you recommend, like for young artists, like what they can find in Australia maybe?
Yeah, well, if you're an Australian, there's Illustrators Australia, I think. I'm not a member of them, but I used to be. But when I first got in, it was good because it kind of got you work. Mm-hmm. I was contacting agencies. I ended up getting an agent in America that was representing me for a while as well. They gave me a lot of work. I think... don't obviously try and look in your local community. Like if whatever state or country you're in, like it's obviously going to be easier because of location. Like there may be an illustration agency or a group that will help you out. And for me, we had Adelaide Illustrators, and it was just coming up, and it's kind of now. It's still there, but it's not as productive for the work for me. It's not the kind of work that I want to do now. Yeah. But if you want to get advertising work or storyboard work, it's great kind of experience to get an insight into working under pressure, working to a deadline, and obviously running a business, an illustration business, because there's I actually got some really interesting jobs out of that. I was doing parody illustrations of superheroes and stuff for a private client, and didn't lead to anything amazing, but it was great experience, and I was getting paid for it, and they were using it for some marketing materials. So Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And would you still, like recommend to go for like freelance work and studio work before you start your own project? Because it's like a good experience as well, and you learn how to work
Yeah.
with teams, and
Yeah.
you know.
Definitely. I mean, I've only, in the last 2-3 years, I've been creating my own intellectual property. But prior to that, I mean, from 2010 until 2015, 5 years, I've been doing freelance. I haven't had a studio job, like inside the studio.
Yeah,
I've had contracts with studios freelance from my home office for, say, a year or a year and a half.
Yeah.
When I was working with Disney, it was a 3-month contract, nonstop doing work for them. So, what you learn is working with teams, even though you might be remote or might be all on Skype. Sometimes I was flown into an office to do work there for like a week or two. But yeah, you learn a lot from that. And I really think, either getting a job in a studio, it is probably hard for young people to get a job in the studio straight away, but trying to do that or do some experience with other companies first before you develop your own IP, I definitely recommend it. And it's given me, I suppose, a badge of honor, or I suppose it's like a certificate to do it on my own. In a way, it's given me the confidence. So, yeah.
And how did you find your agent? When you said like you found the agent, did you just Google agents in the US, or how did it work out?
I basically applied to agents all around the world, and I actually, believe it or not, I didn't get accepted by an Australian agent. I got accepted by an agent in America. So, so that was weird, And but I had the Adelaide Illustrators Group, which is kind of like my agency here, doing more local work, and that was good because you would get paid more. Like having your local kind of agency and then having an agent in America, the American jobs might not pay as fast, that you might be waiting like 2 months for payments, whereas an Australian job, where the company is, you can kind of go in there and have a meeting, and they usually, advertising agencies would pay you fast, or if it was a book illustrator, a book author, or whatever the company was, if they were designing kids' toys or whatever, you knew that they would pay you pretty quick. So yeah, I think you need to have a balance of, international and local clients. I think if you just go and say, I'm going to just rely on international clients, you can be in a lot of trouble because I'm not saying it's scary, but if you don't know the reputation of that client and
exactly, hard to find the right one.
Exactly, they may have a system where it takes 4 months to pay you, or 6 months, or some clients can be amazing overseas, like as well. I mean, I have an author I work with in America, and he pays me straight away pretty much. He gives me a 50% deposit because we have this relationship where he trusts me and I trust him. He knows not to push the boundaries and ask for 50 million things in the page. He trusts my artistic direction, and he'll give me a deposit on the job, and then he'll pay me once the painting is finished for the book cover. So, it's good to have a bit of everything, because if you have studios or clients from different parts of the world, if something doesn't work, then you've got this other client to rely on. So
so maybe you can share that, or like what are your like current incomes and what are your current projects? When you mentioned like you still do some freelance work, and now you're starting your book and Kickstarter is running. So let's talk about that.
Okay, so it's for me, it's really weird. It's like 33, 33, 33, and what that means is it's 33% is client work. I still have clients that will ring me and email me, local, international clients that want book covers. I do book covers for authors. I do concept art for video games, and that's really important. It used to be 50% of my business, but I found that it was very salary capped. Because you've only got so many hours in a day. You can, like, I produce, say, one of the illustrations that you probably saw might take me 4 days to produce, or a week, depending on how many changes or iterations a client might request. So for me, I realized that, well, if I'm just selling a painting, this isn't my price, but let's say my painting is $2,000 for an illustration. I can only do, say, one every 2 weeks at that level. I'm really only making $1,000 a week. So I'm only making a $50,000 salary, which is great, for some people starting out. But if you need more money to survive, or you got more bills, or, you want to grow a business, you kind of have to look at other models. So I kind of started doing, what I noticed was in 2014, I think it was, or 13. I started late 2013. I actually started doing comic conventions in Australia. And our conventions are small compared to America and probably Europe. But we had Supernova in Adelaide, where I am, and it was just kind of like destiny, and it was almost like a sign from above, or whatever you want to believe in, that this is what you should be doing as well. Because I was getting client work and I was making a basic income, but it was always like I was always struggling just until the client would pay me if there was a monthly wait or whatever. And I thought, I'm going to do Supernova in Adelaide. And I gave it a crack. I just had one table with my artworks. And luckily, the actual guests that were there was actually George R.R. Martin. So the writer of Game of Thrones was there. That was just before it was really big. It's just only the first 2 seasons were out. And they had Bronn, they had Caitlin Stark. Tyrion Lannister didn't make it. So I'm talking about the actors, character names, but Tyrion didn't make it. But Bronn and Caitlin were there. And I actually did illustrations of those actors. And they actually signed my original artwork, and they loved it. And George R.R. Martin saw it and he loved it, and he was like, "Who are you? I've never heard of you. Wow." And he was like in awe of my work, and he's like, "Oh, you must be like a budding artist." And the guy he was working with, like the security guard or his friend was like nudging, "This guy's like, he's a professional, think about hiring him, as a joke." And I'm like, "It's all good, man, And so what happened was I just had an amazing amount of sales on that weekend, and I think because a lot of people were there and the guests were really great. They were, obviously George R.R. Martin, you can't top that. And so we ended up, I just realized, shivers, I have to do comic conventions. Just doing client work is only one piece of the puzzle. I still love doing client work, but it's only one piece. And then I said to myself, I'm going to start doing shows in 2014. And they just kept on. For me, obviously my art has a very unique style to what comic conventions in Australia offer. A lot of Australian comic conventions, everyone does a lot of fan art. And I think fan art is common across many of the shows around the world. But what
just to get the attention first, and then you still have your other artworks,
But I wasn't doing that. I just did all original art. The only thing I do is public domain. I do a series of Alice in Wonderland art because I have worked for Disney. I kind of do anything that's in the public domain, like Jungle Book or Alice in Wonderland or Peter Pan. That stuff's been around for 100 years, so you're allowed to do your own iteration of that. And that does bring in people. But then people go, "Oh, what's this other stuff? These are cool dragons." I love to paint landscapes and dragons and big environments and pirate ships and all that sort of cool stuff. And I was started to sell all my original art, and I was like, wow. And it just kept on getting better, bigger, and shows were going good. I still do a lot of shows. I do a lot of shows every year. I do about 10, minimum of 10 shows a year, comic conventions, sometimes 12. And I do them in New Zealand and Australia. I was going to come to America this year, but I had to finish off our game, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we had to get that all finished in China. And and then from doing conventions, fans were like, what's all this art about? All this original stuff? Like, what's it all about? And I'm like, oh, it's a story I'm writing. And I was never confident of my ability as a writer. And I've always been writing comic book stories, and I've kind of being the introverted artist that I am, I'm like always, writing these stories on my notepad or writing down ideas of these characters, their background story and all this. And my fans are like, if you bought a comic, I'll buy that. If you created a comic, I'll actually buy that. I'll throw $100 at you if you give me a comic. And I'm like, all right, I'll hold you to that. So when fans started asking me, what are the stories behind these? And I started making the comic book series Luminous Ages in about 2015. I just started with issue 1, a preview issue, and people were like hungry for it. And we're up to issue 3 now. We're just finishing issue 3. There's a card game attached to it as well. So it's 3 types of games. There's a party game we've made out of it for the whole family to play. We've got a trading card game. We've created about 120 different artworks. Wow. And we've also made a tabletop game as well, a cooperative game where you've got to verse dragon gods and survive with your friends and make sure you don't die. Because dragons can be deadly. So, yes.
Definitely. And so the book, what you are creating now, I mean, which is already created, which is available for people, it's mainly your artworks, or it's also connected somehow to the board games and the stories you created before?
Yeah, so the Luminous Ages comic book, I'm the creator of the whole series. I created most of the art. I also work with one of my clients who was a guy in America called Rob Richardson. He's worked with many independent publishers. He now works on the comic and he's helping with the comic, so I hire him now. I first was getting work with him doing this comic book called The Adventures of Lightning Rod in America. But he now works for me on Luminous Ages. I might illustrate a page of the comic book story and then he'll do the second page. So it's kind of like if I'm away at a con, he'll do a page that I can't do. So it's a collaborative effort, but it's my art direction. It's my characters. I do all the concept art. He doesn't. Sometimes he's like, no idea. How does this character look? Anthony, you've got this great story written. What does this look like? So I have to do the concept art, on the plane. Sometimes I'm painting on my iPad Pro and get off the plane. I'm like, quick send, So, it started off as a comic book universe. It's always been a story. There's a huge narrative behind it. I've written so many characters. It's massive. I've written 2 graphic novels already. We're into issue 3, which is half of a graphic novel. Mm-hmm. But presently on Kickstarter, we've finished issue 3. We've almost done issue 4. Well, I've almost done issue 4 with a watercolor edition. It's all done with watercolors because Rob's doing some of the digital paintings in America while I'm away at cons, and I'm taking watercolors with me on the plane because for me, I just work faster doing watercolors interstate or when I'm at cons.
So that's better for you than the Procreate app?
Yeah, I find it's better. Like it's quicker for me because I started out when I did art I started out as a fine artist when I went to uni, and when I was as a teenager I was taught by a lady called Marjorie Han who did all the Alice in Wonderland books in Australia. She did all the covers, and so she taught me as a teenager to use watercolors, oil pastels, and for me I've gone into watercolors. I still love the iPad Pro digitally painting the comic book panels, but for some reason, like it's great to have originals because you can go, hey, I can sell you this comic book page as well. It's something that I can add to the sale. Or it's also nice. I like the fact that I can just pick up I've got my sequential art there in front of me. I do it on an A3 and I can pencil it all out traditionally. And if I do need to scan it in, I can always scan it in and play with it in Photoshop or paint it up. Sure. And it's great to have originals because I think also with being at cons, you might be there, like I'm going to PAX in Melbourne, I'll be at PAX in Melbourne and you're there for 12 hours in a day selling your art. So it's like your iPad doesn't last that long. Sometimes you have to, so it's batteries kind of suck with those things. So yeah.
And do you have like a favorite tools from the traditional ones, like favorite brand of the paper or watercolors you can share maybe?
Yeah, I like using Canson paper, and I do have a favorite brand of watercolors, but I'll tell you. Wait a second. I'll be 1 second. I'll just go grab it. 1 sec. So, what I have is Daniel Smith, extra fine. You know Daniel Smith? Yeah. So I like those paints. So. That's one of my favorite ones. I always pencil in with a pacer or a lead, like not a lead pencil, but an actual pacer like this. I find that it gives me a nice fine point, so you don't have to sharpen all the time.
You can do the details.
Exactly. And I use a whole range of other pencils as well. I like to use a bit of Copic markers. Sometimes, like even with watercolor, I might add a bit of Copic on top just to give it a bit more depth. So I do a lot of mixed media with my original comic book pages. But we've turned the comic book into a card game. This is the card game. So this is shiny. This is the Dragon mode, Luminous Ages Dragon mode.
Nice.
And that's the party game as well. And I think I got a booster up here, sorry. And that's what our boosters look like for our trading card game as well. So it's 3 products.
Perfect.
So, but the comic book, we have finished issue 1. And That's issue 1 there. Issue 2, and we're working on issue 3 is coming as well. It looks something like that, but it's got a little dragon bird on it. It's on Kickstarter right now, and I think we've got one of the stretch goals is to unlock issue 4, the watercolor edition, so you get another 20-page comic. So basically, as I get more and more funding, we'll unlock more of the comic book. So because that allows me to basically have time off to do the comic. And, you know, the funding goes towards actually my time and the printing. So you're printing it, the artistry behind it, also hiring Rob, who works for me, you know, making sure he's able to do the work properly and that. So, yeah, and it's going really well. I mean, the comic book is, you know, getting really good reviews. Really happy with that. And because for me, like I said, it was always that insecurity that I couldn't write a story, or I was just an artist. But then having people review it and they're saying that they like it, it reminds them of, say, Lord of the Rings meets Star Wars, or reminds them of Neverending Story. That to me kind of makes you feel really happy, and it's good that other people are getting into it. I actually had, I think this year at Sydney Supernova, which is our big comic convention here. We had Chris Hemsworth was here, so he was appeared for a day, and I actually had one of my fans. She came dressed as one of my main characters, Lena of the Light.
Cool.
I know, and I was like, what? You know, like my comic books come to life in a cosplay, you know, and that was like, I think that's the biggest, you know, for me, it's not about the money or hitting the goals or hitting your goals straight away or hitting all the stretch goals or having an amazing Kickstarter and making a lot of money. That helps, you know, you need the money to make your art work.
It helps you to create it.
Exactly. But I think the biggest thing is that people are connecting with it, that there are fans out there that love these characters and they want to create the costumes and they want to be a part of it. And there's people like, I can't wait to see what happens. What are the powers of the dream mages? You know, it's all about dream magic and a dream universe or dream planet. And they're asking, you know, people are asking already, what does a captivary do? What does the luminary do? Come on, reveal it. And I'm like, no, wait till I can't spoil it, you know? So it's great, you know, it's a great feeling that people connecting with it, and
Definitely. And can you maybe share how do you go about creating a world or creating some of the characters in the fantasy world? Because of course you want to be like special, but you still have to have it connected somehow with reality, so it's relatable. So maybe if you can share some tips like what is good to do and which are like maybe no-goes when you're creating your fantasy world.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think, like for me, I'll go through my influence as an artist and who are like I suppose what has influenced me to create art. People like Salvador Dali. I love the movement of surrealism from Spain. That kind of has influenced my visual style. But then, like my background, I'm an Australian born. My parents were born in Australia, but my grandparents come from the Greek part of Cyprus. So that culture is very fascinating because there's so many empires that have been there, you know, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Syrians, and my grandfather and my grandmother, they kind of taught me about the mythology or the legends and the stories of Amazons, of Hercules, of even ancient Egyptian mythology. And as a child, I kind of read all those stories, and even now I still read a lot about mythology. So what I'm trying to do is tie in mythology in with our story. So it's called Luminous Ages because there's actually many ages of mythology that tie in. It's basically this other planet that exists in our universe. It could really be happening. It's this dream planet where dream energy manifests into reality really, really fast. So dream wizards can basically concoct up a spell and a dragon appears. And I can't say how they do it or what happens, but they can do that. And what happens from time to time is dragons or evil wizards have entered through dream portals and they've come to Earth in our history. And so, you know, like heroes like Cadmus and Hercules, well, actually maybe they were dream wizards. They actually had, the reason why Hercules was so strong is because maybe he had a dream sword. So putting a twist to mythology. And we're going to do a big thing about Cadmus, who was a legend from Phoenicia, like near Lebanon. He was he joined Jason and the Argonauts to slay dragons. So Cadmus is a character in our universe, but he ends up coming to Earth, and we go through why he came to Earth, and then why he has to come back to the dream world, our dream world, Oniro, which is So I kind of tie it in a lot with mythology, but the actual planet, the Luminous Ages world, which is called Equatoria, has its own lore, has its own characters. And being from Cyprus, because it's a mash of cultures that have been there, I really wanted to give my fantasy world a surreal feel, but have many cultures and the aesthetics of many cultures. We have a wizard, Arcturus, who looks like a Sikh from India. Thrakos is like a Middle Eastern looking guy. We have Silver the Grey, that's the mother of Thrakos. She's got red hair and she looks like she's from Scotland. And so what I'm trying to do is tie it in with tropes that we have in humanity and then kind of give it a spin. And I kind of don't want to break away too much from the mythology. I don't want to ruin mythology. I kind of want to do justice. And that's why to the legends and mythologies of different countries and parts of the world, because I don't like it kind of being destroyed, or, I just want to give it a bit of flair or a touch that's a bit different, or explain why was Hercules so strong. And he was a demigod, but maybe his sword was, crafted by a dream wizard.
So it's just like parts of that stories or legends that you can imagine with a different twist.
Exactly, yeah. But our Luminous Ages universe is very unique. What Captivaries, Luminaries, and Chosen do is very, very different. But I think what ties them is that kind of the sense of the lore of Earth, how they can, there's also, with what's happening now with our planet, with, environmentalism and the planet and dying and all that sort of stuff, with, overpollution, overpopulation and pollution, we've got that message in Luminous Ages as well. So there's this... I think the best way to describe Luminous Ages, it's like Captain Planet. I don't know if you know Captain Planet meets Harry Potter with many cultures. Oh, so perfect. That's my elevator pitch.
Yeah. A 60-second pitch. Yeah.
That's it. Done. So and that's what I want to do. And also highlight that. Yeah, I love Harry Potter and I love Game of Thrones, and we always kind of picture dragons coming from the West, or always like wizards always being from England, like, Gandalf is a white bearded guy, or Merlin is this old white bearded guy. But throughout even human history and other cultures, there have been, cultures that have revered women as being powerful wizards or oracles. Like the ancient Greeks, they had oracles, they were women, they were these fair-haired, red-haired women. And in Persia, you have the Magi's of Persia. The word magic or magic user comes from Persia. So you have these tanned, skinned Persian wizards, and then further east you go to India. That's where the Persians got their ideas from. And then you have shamanistic cultures from around the world, like, the Native Americans or the indigenous Australians. They have amazing stories and cultures where I want to kind of highlight that and give that aesthetic and bring that into it as well. So, and obviously doing it with I suppose, a unique flavor, and doing it so that, it doesn't offend anyone, hopefully. So, yeah.
And so how did you start about, creating the universe? Did you start it with one character, okay, I really like this, mix of cultures and powers and everything, and then you create a world around him or her? Or did you start it with a map and creating the world, and then you put create characters in it?
There's no real way to do it. I kind of do. Sometimes I sketch in my sketchbook characters, like pencil sketches. I have a map in my head. I have to draw a map for this Kickstarter. I think it's going to be the next stretch goal. I get the map. Everyone gets a print of the map, because I know in my head where all the cities are, but I just haven't had time to draw the map yet. But for me, it's I kind of do a painting. I might do a painting of a city. I've got the narrative, I've written the whole story, but I suppose I start doing a painting of a world or a city that I really want to make look exciting, or, really have a different feel or whatever. And I just go with that. Or if there's sometimes I do a character, and I find that I know I kind of jump around, but for me that works. It's not very logical, but it kind of is lateral thinking. I don't know if that's how creative people work. The girl that works for me, Christy, she's also an illustrator, but she comes from a computer science background. She's very logical. She's she follows steps. But me, I'm like, I can't do that. I have an ADHD brain. Like, yeah, it's kind of like I start doing a character and then I'm like, oh crap, I could do a world over here, or let's do a dragon, and then that dragon fits in with that world, and I kind of piece the puzzle because I kind of do have a vision in my head, and I'm like, no, and it's just weird how it's all kind of falling into place. I have an overarching story, and that I do write a lot, so that helps me, and it's kind of like a foundation in the back of my mind. But then I start doing concepts, and it grows from there. And like Cadmus, there's a Graphus Captivary, that's what he's called, who's based on the Cadmus legends. He was a great dragon slayer who became a dragon. He killed so many dragons, he became one when he died. So like that story, I researched that, but the actual concept art, actually Rob created that. That's the only concept, he did the artwork for that. And I'm like, dude, that's Cadmus, So sometimes I have given Rob the chance to do the concept art, and then I'm like, well, that actually works out well. That character could be Cadmus, because sometimes I struggle with a character, have this vision in my head. Sometimes I draw and it doesn't come out, and then sometimes I pass it on. Like, so I do like 90% of the concept art and the designs myself, but if I'm struggling with something, having someone else as well, like having Rob Richardson, working with a team of people, even Christy, she's got ideas as well. She might say, what about doing it like this? And it's good to bounce ideas off people. So yeah, yes, it's my baby, it's my creation, but, I do bounce ideas off of, my friends or close, colleagues that are working on the project with me. And sometimes, I create a concept of, say, a wizard or a mage, and, Rob's might be better, and that's great, because, I could be stuck on that for a year and never draw that character right. And then sometimes Rob might do a dragon, but my dragon's better. It's more popular, or it looks exactly the way I want it to look, And so that's the benefit of having a few people like that you can bounce ideas off. So I definitely recommend, even if you can trust people, if you're starting out your own things, if you can find a group of artists or network with people that you trust, or a mate or a friend, and show them your ideas, and they might do something for you, or you might,
work on a project together somehow. Yeah.
So teamwork is great, definitely. So yeah.
And do you work also with like spatial shapes, or the kind of the obvious go for like when the character is mean, then you do like sharp edges or so, or like good characters with round edges, or how do you go about visually kind of communicating the personality or the actions of the character?
Yeah, well, definitely, there are archetypes, you know what I mean? So if you're going to have someone that's angry or a villain, they're going to be, jagged shapes and all that sort of stuff. We've got demons in our comic, and so the demons often have these kind of real angular faces and angry looking faces, and the good people have like Silver the Grey out. She's our main hero. She saved the planet last time. She's gone missing. And like we've given her a very kind of soft-looking face, and she's quite a strong character. She wears all armor, metal armor, and she rides a dragon and all that sort of stuff. But she has this very soft face, and then we've got Thrakos, who is actually a clumsy character, and he looks like Nicolas Cage. People are saying that it looks like. So
he would be happy to hear that.
Yeah, maybe, but it wasn't my intention, because it actually is based off of my cousin, who's also goofy. But, he doesn't look exactly like Nicolas Cage, my cousin, but the way I designed it was inspired by my cousin. But the time I painted it, it kind of looks a little bit like Nicolas Cage. So that means like our main character in the comic, issue 123, Thrakos, who we're following right now, he's goofy, he's clumsy, and that's part of his, archetypal character. He's the clumsy one. He's kind of like the Han Solo character as well. He's a bit of a rogue. He might steal someone's magic spell or their potion or something like that. So I think you rely on archetypes and with your characters, and the nerdy person or the real, like the wizard that's a real smart one. He's going to have the glasses, or they're going to be the scrawny type, or or the if you've got a character that's really strong, like I suppose Cadmus would be our Conan the Barbarian kind of thing. He's going to be beefy, muscly, and all that sort of stuff. And he evolves, he changes a bit. But as your character changes in their mood, or as they progress in the storyline, they also progress visually. And you do kind of follow those archetypes, but you be you stick to the archetypes, but you have to be creative with that as well. Like, don't just go, okay, I'm going to make a Conan the Barbarian style character and, and do it exactly like that.
Same. Yeah.
Exactly. You add a flavor to it that's different. So he still has that brooding look or that strong look, but then maybe he's wearing, I don't know, a cape or something else. Or
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And maybe if we go back a bit to the Kickstarter campaign, can you share maybe some tips for people who want to start a Kickstarter, like how to prepare for it and maybe how to decide on a stretch goals or, some cool tips?
Well, this is my 4th Kickstarter now, so I've done 3 and they were all fully funded. One was, my game just made it over the line, so it was about 110% funded because I think the game I struggled with a lot, and that's interesting. So I can go through what I did wrong with that and maybe explain, I think my initial goal of getting $15,000, I think it was, or no, it was 20, sorry. I think for someone who, it was my first game I've ever created, I made my game too ambitious and I needed to simplify it. Like this game here, it's an amazing game because you can play it as like a cooperative game against the Dragon Gods. You can also play it as a TCG inside there or a deck builder. And I think that intimidated the Kickstarter community. With Kickstarter, you have to make it simple. You have to go, this is what I'm doing and that's it. It's just a game. It's a one style of game. You have to kind of keep it simple, silly. That's where I went wrong with that one. The first one I did was just for issue 1 of my comic and a little concept art book. That did really well. That was like 400% funded because it's easy. It's like, hey, I'm making a comic and I only needed like $2,000 for printing it. And then it just went up to about, I think I needed only $1,000 and I think we got about $5,000. And then I did an art book in June and I looked at like the cost, it was only about $5,000 and we smashed it. We got about $16,500, which is great for an Aussie creator because there's not many Aussies doing what I'm doing as well. So yeah, I think the goal is to set realistic kind of initial funding, like really ask for what you need. I know I really did need the $20,000 to make the game, but I could have dropped it down to 15,000, and I'm glad I didn't, but because it has costed me more than that.
Yeah, it was always unexpected costs.
Yes, exactly. Shipping over stock, from China by air, or because we needed it fast, and all that sort of stuff. There's all these things that you've got to account for. So I could say, I know this was kind of my 2nd Kickstarter, but I wish the game was my 3rd instead. I did the art book first, but in saying so, if I didn't do the game, then maybe I wouldn't have gotten $16,000 on my art book, which was, we hit that really quickly. So, and I think we've done 3 now and doing this comic, the comic is going really well. I think, we've got 3 Kickstarters behind our belt, so I have about 500, fans that really like what I've done. And so I've got all that momentum's built up. But I think if you're going to start Kickstarters, really have realistic expectations. Start with a small project. This for me was a love project. I've always wanted to make a board game. And so for me, it did cost me in time this year. Like I was meant to go to America, like I said before earlier on. But the problem was we were waiting on manufacturing all the components, the tokens, the dice. And so it was delayed. So it got to us by July, but I was meant to be in Gen Con in August, and there's no way that I would have been able to collect it from the airport, from the seaport, and also go to Gen Con. So I would have gone to Gen Con with no game. Yeah, but our backers still got the game in July, which was only a month past the deadline. I think we promised maybe late May or June. But there's things like that. Like I kind of thought, because we had been making the boosters and the party mode, the actual other cards, I thought it'll be like that. But no, when you're making a board game, you've got all these other little components. And I think the lesson is if you're going to start a Kickstarter, just start simple. That's where my success came from at the start, was just doing the comic book and doing a little concept art book that goes with the comic. And that's why I've gone back to simplicity with my 4th Kickstarter right now, that's up right now. You can all check it out. Just look for Luminous Ages, you'll see it. I just said it's a comic book. That's it. We're doing up to issue 3. We're unlocking issue 4, possibly even another book. And what we're trying to do is just make it very simple. It's just a comic and you get a commission with it. Because I think throughout November, Kickstarter's doing a thing called Commissions Kickstarter. I was going to launch it on October the 18th. So, and lucky we didn't, because we still didn't have everything done. We needed all of October to actually finish off, to prepare, to proof it, to check it. Like I said, Christou, who's an illustrator who works with me, she checked things for me. She was fixing up the graphic design components for me, and right up until the day we launched, and also marketing, is really important. A lot of what you want to do is make sure you have about, 50 to 100 people that are going to back your project. Like, try and get a newsletter, try and get a Facebook group set up, or, at least have engaged fans that are interested in, because if you just launch, you could launch to crickets, essentially, to no one being there, and that's the worst. I'm not saying it's a failure, but I've been, knock on wood, I've been lucky. I have a fan base in Australia, New Zealand, and I've now got a lot of fans in Europe, actually, in Germany. I get a lot of fans in Germany and the UK backing me, and a bit in America. But it's just, I think, is just prepare, is get the actual graphic design of it looking right. Make sure your costs are figured out, your postage. Allow for 10%, allow for 7 or 8% of what Kickstarter takes. Mm-hmm. But I always say add 10% onto your price, because 10% is postage. Mm-hmm. So if you have $4,000, if you're going for, say, $4,000, that's all you need to print, say, 4 comics, right? Whatever it is. You got to allow for another say 10% on top of that, or even 20%. So even if your goal is $4,000, you have to add another $800 for postage. Even though customers are paying for postage, you may only get, say, if you're doing a print run of 1,000 books, you may only get orders for 200 books, but you still got to print 1,000 books. Oops, sorry. So you still got to print 1,000 books or whatever. So you have to, if you're only shipping 200, your $4,000 has been used to print those books, but you still got to pay for shipping of 200 books. And even though it's in the Kickstarter money, it's hard to explain, but there's like a ratio to it. You have, if you work it out, I've experienced it doing 3 that I've always been like, how come all the money's gone? And it's because it goes back into the postage of the products. It's very expensive. I mean, I think to ship this, the game's like $50 to retail. There's about $50 for the game, but it's $35 to post it from Australia to America. I mean, that's Australian dollars, so it might be a bit cheaper in euro. But, so, it's almost the same price to post the game than it is for them to buy it, in person from me. So, yeah.
So then you have to figure out the cost of everything before, and just to put some buffer there, so just to be sure. Exactly.
Yeah, so your printing cost might be, say, $4,000 for, say, 4 comics or whatever it is. I'm just giving you a guesstimate. But you need to add another 10% or whatever it is for postage, and you can put the postage price into the product when you're, for all the tiers, but you got to factor in, you need that buffer. It's really, the mathematics behind it is really interesting, because it's a scaling system. So I actually hope I sell 1,000 comics, because that way I can, it's basically even Steven for me, whereas if I have to print 1,000 books and I'm shipping to only 100 people, I still have, basically, if I've got 100 books and it's cost me $4,000, and you've got 100 customers that want that comic book, you're still spending $1,000. So if you only get $5,000 in your Kickstarter, or $4,000, and you needed $5,000 because you got the postage, even though people have paid for it, they think they've paid for it, which they have, the postage adds up towards the goal, if you know what I mean. So like when you make a pledge of, say, $40, that adds towards your goal. So yeah, it's all that kind of mathematics, and I don't want to scare people from doing it. I'm just saying allow for maybe 20% more on what you have. So if you want $4,000, add 20% to it, because there's always those things you got to watch out for. So
yeah, that's a really good tip, because that's the easy way to look at it. Just add more, and then you do your calculations along the way or before, and so you're not surprised. Definitely.
And I think that's also why you do a Kickstarter that's simple to start off with, like just a little art book or a little comic book or collector cards or whatever you want to do, make it a simple project and have one product. Whereas if you have a few different products and you've got to add those costs into it, then it becomes more complex. And it's business. It is a business. We are artists and we're putting our heart and soul into what we create, but it is a business, and we have a thing called cost of goods sold, So what are the costs of selling this good? What is the cost of selling a board game or whatever? And there's, there are always things that you have to factor in, like taxes and all that sort of stuff, the realities of doing it, So
Definitely.
But, I hope that helps out for anyone that's listening,
Yeah, definitely.
So,
and thank you so much for sharing, because that's a really good insight, just, when you already did few projects with Kickstarter. And maybe, is there something you wish you knew before you started the whole art career, like advice to young self, either about the Kickstarters or, like working for...
Getting into business.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest lesson I've learned, like, when I first got some freelance work back 6 years ago in 2011, I was getting a few paid jobs, and I don't want to say anything bad about any studios or any companies, but I had a reasonably good studio in Australia that has made some movies. I can't say who, but they approached me and they said, like, do you want to work? We've only got this little bit of money and we'll pay you once we get the funding for the project. Yeah. And being like the starry-eyed concept artist, I was like, oh my God, I get to be in a movie. This is awesome. I get to do the concept art. I kind of agreed to do it for a very low fee, and I'm still waiting for the money, know. Yeah, so it was I suppose, it's bad that, if you go and offer your services at a discounted price or free, you think I'm going to work on a movie or a video game. I really recommend don't work for free. And even if you're going to do anything for free, do it for yourself. Mm-hmm. Go and design like right now I'm creating the comic book. It's profitable, but I'd rather have spent that whatever it was, 2 months I worked for that client on doing my own comic, because you're not going to get that time back. And I learned from there to have contracts in place, to make sure that the contract's fair, that there is a payment plan, and to not think that just because it's a feature film project or it's a AAA video game, that you're going to get paid one day. Sometimes, you may never get paid. That project, you may be doing concept art for them to pitch this to, wherever they got to go, to a big game convention or a film convention in France, And so you do this art and you think, oh, no, it's going to make it. This film is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. Yeah. And you've got all this art sitting there, and sometimes you can't even reveal it to the world. You can maybe show it privately to people, go like other concept artists you trust, or you go for a job, it works for that. So, it's good because you get the experience. It is good. The good thing, the takeaway from it is you get experience. I did get industry work, but you learn to be a bit tougher. Yeah. You learn to go, I'm not going to do something for free. And that was 6 years ago. So I've never done anything for free since. But the only thing I do for free is creating my own stuff. And that's my advice to people is try and create your own projects. Mm-hmm. Don't do anything for free. Or if you do something and the payment's going to be later, have a contract in place. If the client can't afford to pay you now, get a deposit. Mm-hmm. Always get some sort of deposit, and then have a payment plan and say, look, I need that money in 6 months or 3 months and that. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I've learned the hard way. And it is disappointing when you think like a big client or a studio should have this money and they don't pay you, or it's not that they don't have the money, it's just that film may not go ahead, and if it doesn't go ahead, it's been canned, it's on the shelf. So they're not really being bad, they're kind of covering their bases. But if you don't look into contracts, don't be starry-eyed, don't think, oh my God, I'm going to get to work on a movie or a game, and don't, I kind of sign away, the rights on the contract, and you kind of think, oh, it'll happen, you think. So it's not bad, it's not good, it's just a lesson learned, and it makes you a better artist, better in business. And I think if I was a kid and, I said, someone came up to me and said, someone gave me some lessons, I think I would like someone to come up to me and say, learn about marketing. Marketing is a really important part in art, in the art world. Understand, your market audience and get yourself out there. Don't just sit in the studio and paint and draw. Go to a con, even if you're starting out and you've just finished university or just finished your art course, go to a local convention, go to a small one. If you're not confident, start small, and just getting a few sales might give you that confidence to start doing stuff. Because I was an artist from 2009 or 2008 and 9. I was doing the Gnomon workshop contest. I was getting freelance work, and I didn't do a con till 2013. And yes, I had clients for 3 years from 2010 to 2013, but like for me, it was such a confidence boost to go that people just giving you money straight away for a print or for a comic or whatever that you've created. It's that instant gratification, and it's, you know, that's one thing is the lesson is you've got to put yourself out there. If you don't put yourself out there and ask for help, like, you know, going on Kickstarter or going to comic convention or doing your local markets, if there's markets in your community, you know, for art and craft markets, try that out, you know. So the more you get out there, the better off you're going to be. Or networking, if you don't want to be selling your art, if you don't have your own product to sell, go to conventions. There's so many awesome conventions I haven't been to yet. I mean, there's the IFCC, there's Trojan Horse. That Christy, who works for me, she went to Trojan Horse.
Yeah, I heard about that as well. That is good.
Yeah. So Christy, who works for me, she got a month off, and she went there, and I was like so jealous, but
so next year.
Good. Next year, yeah, maybe. But I mean, I have been to conventions. I went to the Concept Design Workshop in Australia. They took us to New Zealand to meet all the Weta people. So that was a good experience for me. So even if you don't have artwork that you can sell or you don't feel confident selling, network with potential clients. Go to these cons, meet other artists, talk to them, meet art directors. They may give you some insight on how you can get better, you know. You know, and like even me, I do the comic conventions, and yeah, it's all, you know, sales is a big focus of it, selling my product and engaging with fans and hearing what people have to say about my art or my comic or giving people what they want. But the other thing with doing the conventions, I met like an art director in Melbourne, a friend of mine who's become a friend of mine, who's he's done an animated feature called Shopkins in Australia. I don't know if you had Shopkins, they're toys. I don't know if they've hit Europe yet, but he's like the art director on an animation, and he was just doing a booth like me. He had a little booth, and we started talking about art. He was appreciating my art. I was appreciating his art, you know. And if you come from a place of being humble and respecting other artists and, you know, appreciating what they're doing, you know, we became friends, and, you know, he's kind of, I found out, oh, wow, he's an art director on this big animated feature film, you know. So it's kind of, that's the other thing, like you don't know where you're going to meet people, you know, like people that are in the industry. They could be at cons, they could be at, you know, Trojan Horse or whatever, definitely there, but, you know, so put yourself out there. That's the lesson. So yeah, don't be shy. Don't be shy.
And even if you're shy, just try to overcome it, because you never know what opportunities would come from it. Definitely.
Exactly right. Yes.
And let's talk about the future. And I would like to know, where would you see yourself in like 5 to 10 years? You know, like if you have the dream scenario, everything is going according to the plan. And also, what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years or more?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I kind of am living the dream because I'm creating my own IP more. I have got clients, but that's the focus of what I'm doing right now. And the cons have been helping me to do that, which is amazing. But I think it would be great if in 5 to 10 years, say, Luminous Ages, the comic book, becomes an animated TV show on Netflix or Nickelodeon. And then the trading card game that we've been creating is actually massive, like Pokemon, you know. And I really respect what all these other companies around the world have done. Like, they've inspired me to do this, like Magic the Gathering and Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! All that stuff is amazing. But in Australia, we don't actually have anything that's, apart from Mad Max, I don't know there's anything big that's come out of Australia. So I'd like to have a studio that's creating IPs for Australia and doing something that puts us on a worldwide map, so that people, when they come to Adelaide, they want to go and do, instead of going to the Hobbit tour in New Zealand, they come to Adelaide, they do the Dream Magicians tour of a special red rock, I don't know, you know, something, a sacred area or a really cool place, you know. And that's kind of my long-term vision is I suppose, put our, you know, stuff on the map. And, and 100 years, 100 years, I don't know. I really don't know. I suppose for me, it's like obviously doing what I'm doing, be remembered for amazing stories, amazing artwork, you know, and games and all that sort of stuff, and amazing entertainment, you know, but leave like messages of hope and positivity, that things that maybe help people to overcome whatever issues they have, like anxieties, or give a message of hope for the world, because you know the world's a very dark place, you know, it can be. And, you know, if my stories can help people to overcome that darkness, that's kind of what I'd love to do in 100 years. You know, if it does that, you know, gives people hope, or gives people, I suppose, a release, or, you know, makes them happy. That's really all I really want to do with art. I can't cure cancer. I can't, you know, I don't have the cure for diseases, but I think art does make people happy, and I think happiness does lead to, or storytelling and happiness does lead to escapism, and that escapism does, you know, help people, make them happier, or, you know, I hope it makes them happier, but it definitely, you know, does good stuff, I think. So
yeah, just to keep positive and
That's
happy approach, and because it's like when you decide to be happy, then that leads to also to success, where some people believe like, oh yeah, when I will be successful I will be happy, but if you start with being happy, then it goes somewhere.
Exactly. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. And I'm super happy that you took time to be here, and that you shared your stories and everything. And maybe before we say goodbye, you can share like last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we will slowly finish.
I have a quote that I kind of follow. It comes from a Persian wizard. His name was Zoroaster, and it was good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, and live with passion. So that's my quote. So
perfect. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Thank you again so much for being here.
Not a problem. No, thank you for having me. It's been great. So thanks a lot. And your YouTube channel looks amazing. So yeah, it's an honor to be on it. Thank you so much.
I'm super happy that you enjoyed, and I am also thankful for everyone for joining to listen or watch today, and see you in the next episode.
No worries. Thank you.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and let me know in comments. Also, please subscribe to my channel for more videos, because I post new interview every single workday. You can also find the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a little freebie waiting for you, so go check it out. If you want to listen to the interviews on the go, make sure to check out the podcast episodes at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and don't forget to inspire each other. I will see you guys in the next episode.